Welcome back to McNulty's Book Corral. Today I have for you a really interesting book that I want to recommend, The Winter of the Fisher, and this is by Cameron Langford. Now, this was his only book. I want to read to you from the back a very brief bio on the author. Cameron Langford was a radio announcer and advertising writer in Toronto. In 1952, an automobile accident robbed him of the use of 75% of his body, but he continued to work full-time from his wheelchair. The manuscript for The Winter of the Fisher, his only book, was in its final stages of revision when he died. And what a book it is. This is a fantastic book. It's a year in the life of a fisher told from two perspectives. First, he tells it from the perspective of the fisher from birth through the course of his first year. And then he tells it from the perspective of an Ojibwe elder, a tribal member, who doesn't have a name. He's simply referred to as an Ojibwe. And that man plays a role in the fisher's life early on when he actually nurses the injured baby fisher to health. And then for the rest of the year, the book describes between the two of them their encounters and the fisher's encounter with other animals. So he does take the perspective of the fisher for sections of the book. It's a haunting book. It's beautifully written. It captures the loneliness and brutality of the forest life for wildlife. Just an incredible piece of writing. And I do want to read to you. Two paragraphs right at the beginning, so there's no spoilers here. This is right after his birth, and this gives you a taste of the author's writing. Another week, his eyes were fully opened, and he had learned to control them well enough to see his mother clearly. Her sighs startled him. One day, entering the den, she frightened him from the warm depths of dreaming, and he snarled his first infant challenge. Then he caught the wonderfully familiar milk, musk, and mother smell, and tottered forward hungrily. She was mother, and she was food, and so he loved her deeply. He was too young, too animal, to understand how incredibly beautiful she was. Her lithe body was slightly under 3 feet long. Though she was large for a female fisher, her son would eventually top her by a foot. More than a third of her length was tail, but even its magnificence was surpassed by the depth and luster of her coat. Honeyed highlights danced deep in the rich brown under fiber through which longer, darker guard hairs grew, adding a brilliant, changing texture to the subtly shifting tones. Her head was triangular, from which glowed two exceptionally intelligent eyes, their calm wisdom enhanced by the faint silver grizzlings of the guard hairs across her head and shoulders. Her fangs, when they were revealed, were obviously those of an animal that knew precisely how to care for herself and her kittens. Or perhaps the impression of enormous competence was in her body and the way she moved. She was strikingly slender. Not thin, but slender, with the sculptured sleekness that reveals an inward controlled power and strength. When she moved, it was like willows weeping in the wind. Now that's a beautiful, beautiful description of the mother fisher in the book. The fisher is a member of the badger, the weasel family, and they are very rarely encountered in the wild. In all of my decades in the northwoods, I have yet to see a fisher live. However, a couple of years ago, I began to pick up a fisher on one of the many cameras on my property, and I had stills. First there were stills, and then I had video of the fisher. And because I wanted to talk about this book a little bit, I put together some of that footage of the fisher. It's really a reclusive animal that knows how to hide from people. By the way, the fisher is a dangerous animal, as most wildlife animals are. If you see a fisher, don't approach it in the wild. It's highly unlikely you would, but it's possible. I've strung together at the end here, or following this little gab session, I've strung together the video, some of the better video I have of the fisher here in the Northwoods at my other home. And I thought you might be interested in watching it because it is a rare sight to see such an animal. And I narrated the little video. It's about 4 minutes with some facts about the fisher that you'll hopefully find interesting in our consideration today of The Winter of the Fisher by Cameron Langford, a writer who beautifully conveys the majesty and loneliness and depths of the northwoods life for wildlife with his depiction of The Winter of the Fisher. Really fantastic book. By the way, there's kind of a cult following around this book. People that are aware of it really love it. I consider this a keeper for my library, and I'll be taking this to the cabin next time I go up to keep it in my my cabin library up there, because that's where it belongs. In the meantime, short video here today, but in the meantime, take a look at this rare footage I have of the Fisher, and perhaps learn a few things you didn't know. It's a learning experience. The wildlife in the national forest, it's a learning experience, even for me, after all these decades. I hope you enjoy the little movie, and I hope you get a chance to track down The Winter of the Fisher. Stay well. Stay happy. Feed your brain. Read a book. The Fisher is also known as the Fisher cat, although it is not a cat. It is also not very good at fishing and rarely eats fish. The Fisher is reclusive and only associates with other fishers during mating season. The Fisher is a loner, living a solitary life where hunting food is its main activity. I have a scrap table set up in the woods and surrounded by cameras, where I sometimes toss dinner scraps. The Fisher is an opportunistic hunter, and this past summer it began competing with the raccoons, fox, coyotes, and bear for any scraps left on the table. Most of the scraps I toss out are wheat, cereal, bread, sometimes hamburger meat, none of which is harmful to the animals. In this rare color footage, we can see the brown fur along the Fisher's head and neck. At night, the Fisher is nearly invisible in the dark forest. The Fisher is closely related to the marten, and both are prized for their fur. The Fisher is carnivorous, but it also eats mushrooms, plants, along with mice, rabbits, and even porcupines. Fishers have long vampiric teeth and razor-sharp retractable claws. The Fisher is dangerous and a ferocious fighter. The Fisher has been known to kill porcupines, one of the few animals that can, by flipping them onto their backs and disemboweling them with their claws. The Fisher has been known to kill raccoon, fox, martens, otters, and turkeys. Like most animals, the Fisher is aware of the trail cam. Their astute hearing can pick up the tiniest mechanism fluttering to life. The Fisher's body is long and thin, sometimes over 40 inches, and they are powerful animals. Look at the claws in this footage, and you can imagine its ability to climb trees, although they prefer to explore the forest on the ground. The Fisher's primary predator, of course, is man. And while it eats, you'll note its constant alertness to its surroundings. Other animals and hunters would be of great concern, although the Fisher is generally the type that would fight other animals, but humans are not safe from the Fisher's bite or from its claws. The forest surrounding my cabin is highly populated, so the Fisher will be wary of any people coming along walking their dogs. Fishers have been known to kill dogs, so proceed with caution should you happen to come across a Fisher while hiking in the North Woods. I believe this Fisher lives very close to my cabin, but its hunting territory could encompass over 3 miles. In this amazing footage, the fisher is sniffing at the table when a raccoon approaches and chases him away. That surprised me, but this is a smaller fisher and obviously decided not to fight. Here's another view of the raccoon attack from a different camera. The fisher is intelligent and ever alert to danger. Watch how the fisher becomes aware of another animal approaching. How swiftly the fisher can move. It was the fox, and the fox briefly took over the table.